Viewer discretion is advised.
The Hawks are owned by 6 people that include Tony Ressler, a billionaire that made his money in the finance industry and owns several private equity firms, aka a loan shark. Stephen Price, who is the executive chair of Town Square Media, which owns a bunch of radio stations. Rich Schnall, who made his money in finance. Sarah Blakely, who invented Spanx for women to hide their fat. Former rapper Jesse Itzler, aka Jesse James, who is married to Blakely, who after making the song Shake It Like a White Girl, founded the company Marquis Jet, which he sold to Warren Buffett. Here's some of his hot track. Wow, good thing he went and got a day job. And of course Grant Hill, who was a rich kid and ended up playing basketball for a living and flopped his way to 2 national championships in college. It's worth bringing up that every Hawks owner except one is Jewish. Can you guess which one it is? The Atlanta Hawks. Many people might not know this, but the Hawks, who were in St. Louis at the time, drafted Bill Russell in 1956 and traded him away. That's kind of funny considering in 1956 how many 6'11" tall super athletic black basketball players were there. Fitting that the word traded is an anagram for tarded, which in this case, the Hawks shipped a legend who would win 11 championships for a bunch of no-name. Now, Dominique was awesome for a long time, but the Hawks continually have not gotten close to a championship. In fact, your only championship was in 1958 in St. Louis, and you've been about as successful in the city of Atlanta as the traffic engineers have been. To anyone out there, it's very dark down here in the basement of the Eastern Conference. Please send help and an entirely new roster for our team that always sucks in the playoffs. Signed, the Atlanta Hawks. This game occurred 2 years after the NBA implemented the shot clock. Before that, the league looked like an uninspired game of keep away. And as they learn, the more shots you take, the more go in, as every Laker in this game scored 10 or more points, and there were 10 of them. This was a playoff game, and it leveled the 3-game series at 1. Bob Pettit led the Hawks with 14 points, and they got it together and won the next game and the series. A mascot that actually makes sense. Harry the Hawk looks very punchable for some strange reason. Known for his slick dance moves, this bird gets down, and here is him doing 2 things Melo didn't do for the Hawks: getting on the floor and playing defense. The place that Jake from State Farm built, this downtown arena features a structure at its entrance that spells out Atlanta, in case anyone forgot where they are. Before 2017, one side of the arena had the luxury suites, while all of the poor people sat on the other side. The suite wall was removed in favor of better seating and equality. You will hear this word a lot: tampering. Though the NBA seems to do nothing about their own rules, the Hawks got nabbed for tampering because they were so obvious about it. In 2013, they sent out letters to prospective ticket buyers mentioning both Dwight Howard and Chris Paul as potential Hawks for the upcoming season. This was the definition of tampering, I guess. They did get one out of those 2. How did that work out? Trae Young should have no problem staying safe, considered he stays 6 feet away when he's playing defense. Kevin Huerter, who was drafted to match the team's uniforms, is having a solid sophomore season, but the Hawks are learning with their most recent pick. Cam Reddish was really only good in college because all 5 defenders were focused on his Duke teammates. How about having the top seed in 2015 only to have the Cavs eject you from the playoffs like Al Horford in Game 3?
Harry the Hawk, Atlanta. As you probably know, I'm a huge fan of bird mascots, but while Harry the Hawk is good, he looks a little too angry at all times. Lighten up, dude. I know you live in Atlanta, but you're scaring the kids. Rating, 7 out of 10. Atlanta Hawks, Bob Pettit. Casuals might argue for Dominique Wilkins thanks to his long highlight reel, but the only correct answer here is Bob Pettit, one of the earliest superstars in NBA history that gets forgotten about a lot nowadays. Pettit was a 2-time NBA MVP and the best player on the franchise's only championship team in 1958, which is the only team to ever beat Bill Russell in an NBA Finals, although to be fair, Russell was injured in that series. If not for Russell's Celtics, Pettit's Hawks might have won 3 or 4 rings. Also, did you see how fucking hairy he is? Jesus Christ. Somebody get him a goddamn ring. Atlanta Hawks, DeMar Johnson. Johnson was a member of the infamously terrible 2000 NBA draft. He was a 6'8" small forward who could shoot the three ball at a respectable rate, but his time with the Hawks was very short and nearly fatal. After 2 disappointing seasons to start his career, Johnson was in a near-fatal car crash before the start of his 3rd year. To his credit, he fought back from near paralysis to play a few more years in the NBA, but it's safe to say Atlanta had more in mind than just 2 subpar years for this former 6th overall. The Atlanta Hawks, getting swept in the 2015 Eastern Conference Finals after winning 60 games. The 2015 Hawks were called the Spurs of the East for their unselfish basketball and for racking up wins, so it wasn't a surprise when they got to the Eastern Conference Finals. But what was a surprise was how easily they were manhandled by the Cleveland Cavaliers, led by the newly returned LeBron James. Not only was Atlanta swept in embarrassing fashion, Kyrie Irving missed 2 games with foot injuries and Kevin Love didn't even play at all. It was yet another example of why people don't take the Hawks franchise seriously in big moments. The Atlanta Hawks, John Collins. This is a bit of a heel turn for me because for the longest time I actually thought that John Collins was somewhat underrated, but in recent years, especially this past year, he has regressed, averaging just 13 points per game before bottoming out in the playoffs. But that hasn't stopped his bank account, as he's the 2nd highest paid player on the Hawks despite not being nearly their 2nd best player. I wouldn't be surprised if the Hawks try to move him this offseason. Atlanta Hawks, Cliff Hagan, 1958. You're probably saying, Cliff who? Exactly. The Hawks don't exactly have the greatest history of playoff success, although back in the late 50s, early 60s in the Bob Pettit era, they were one of the better teams in the league. Shockingly, it wasn't Pettit who takes the crown here, as Cliff Hagan was the team's best player and the best player in the postseason in 1958 when the Hawks won it all, their only championship in franchise history. Hagan's best game of the playoffs came in Game 1 of the 1958 Western Division Finals, where he dropped in 38 points and 17 rebounds on 57% shooting. Atlanta Hawks, John Koncak. Koncak was most famous for his massive contract that he got, giving him the nickname John Contract. He somehow managed to play 10 seasons for Atlanta, appearing in 717 regular season games. In that time, he averaged 4.6 points and 5 rebounds and 1 assist. Ironically enough, his best season might have been his rookie year when he averaged 8.3 points per game. He never averaged more than 6 points a game in any other year after that. If you're trying to argue that white privilege is real, just look at this guy's career. I'm kidding, or am I? Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks are never a real threat to win a title, even when they're good. Trading Luka for Trae Young on draft night was a massive mistake. Young puts up nice stats, but his shot selection and defense are atrocious. He isn't a great three-point shooter, and he looks like a lollipop that fell onto a rug. He'll never win anything, just like the rest of this irrelevant franchise.